Of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for Monday, November 25th, 2019. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion, there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the agenda is approved. Next is approval of the minutes from the October 20th, 2019 meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions? Not, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are adopted. Next, we move to employee recognition. We have General Manager Koistra.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we have 4 recognitions today, two bus operators and 2 rail operators. Mary Johnson will be introducing and speaking about the bus operators, and Schwab Bellum will be speaking about the 2 rail operators. So I'll ask Mary to come up first, and then after Mary finishes, then we'll ask Schwab to come up, and then we'll give the awards.
Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'd like to present Hadia Badwe, also known as D, and as well as Prue Noon. First, I'll explain what Hadia did. So I'd like to, on behalf of the, on behalf of the Bus Transportation Department of Metro Transit, I am currently an assistant manager with Haywood Garage, formerly at East Metro Garage. So the reason that Ms. Hadia is being recognized today is for her commendable actions on October 24th of 2019. This all started back on August 4th of 2019 while driving a Route 64 on the east side of St. Paul. Ms. Gabbard witnessed a brutal stabbing between 2 passengers on her bus. One of the passengers was transported to Regents Hospital due to injuries while the assailant got away. But on October 24th of 2019, Ms. Gabbard saw the assailant while out driving in her personal vehicle. She reported the sighting by calling 911. Both St. Paul and Metro Transit Police responded to the area. The officers were able to capture the assailant, who was then charged with second-degree assault. Metro Transit Police Sergeant Corey Martins was very impressed with Ms. Gabbard and wanted to recognize her. He was very impressed that she was able to recognize him 2+ months after the original incident, without seeing him or a picture of him since while driving her own vehicle and off the clock. Ms. Gabbard exhibited a very high level of professionalism on behalf of Metro Transit while both on and off duty. Not only did she recognize the person that committed the crime on her bus, but she had the presence of mind to call and report the sighting to the authorities. Now, Mr. Dewan, back on Wednesday, July 31st, received a customer commendation. So the customer wrote in on Wednesday, July 31st of 2019. I was on my normal bus route home. Bus 288 was heading north, which leaves downtown Minneapolis around 4 p.m. It was a normal, quiet route home until we passed County Road J on 35E. That was when everything changed. There was a motorcyclist who had lost control of his bike at a high speed and crashed into the right hand of the shoulder. Mr. Pruitt not only pulled over and blocked the traffic for a few minutes, he also allowed the first responder and a nurse who were on his bus to jump out and help. They were one of the first on scene to assist. Meanwhile, other passengers are on their phones calling 911. Overall, the bus driver remained calm, patient, and willing to help at all costs that day. Please make sure this letter gets to supervisor. He deserves nothing but praise and recognition from all of his passengers that day and the motorcyclist who survived the horrendous crash.
Great, thank you. And then we'll ask Schwab to introduce the rail operators, and then we'll present the awards.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you for allowing me to recognize my 2 rail operators. My name is Shoaib Belim. I'm an assistant manager on the Green Line, and on behalf of the Rail Transportation Department, I'd like to recognize Ali Jama on May 4th, 2019. Mr. Jama observed 2 individuals fighting on the Central Station platform as he was heading westbound and observed that one of them fell in between the couplers as the train was departing. If it was not for his alertness and safe train handling, there is no doubt this person would have been killed. So I'd like to recognize Mr. Jama for being vigilant and saving someone's life. Mr. Kurt Morales, on June 15th at about 5:53 p.m. in the evening, he was a westbound train approaching Dale Street Station. There was already an eastbound train at Dale Street. Passenger got off the eastbound train, went through the couplers area, was about to be in the path of the westbound train. Mr. Kurt Morales realized the danger. He applied the emergency brake application and saved the person's life. So I'd like to recognize Sir Ali Jama and Kurt Morales.
Thank you all again. Next, we're on to the next order of business, which is our tab liaison report. You'll see Mr. Dugan is not with us, couldn't make it here tonight, so Director Thompson will present the tab liaison report.
Madam Chair and members, the November tab meeting, the main focus of the meeting was to review public comments on the regional solicitation application that was out for public comment this past fall. The council received 12 letters from local governments, transit operators, and one advocacy group commenting on the draft application and some of the changes in there. We did not receive any, I would say, general public comment. Most of the comments were received from those that had been involved in the application draft. In those 12 letters, we had 26 unique comments that were mostly focused around the major changes that were being proposed from our policymaker working group that met all summer that included council members. We received a lot of comments regarding the proposed shift in modal funding range that would result in an increase in the transit funding and the creation of a unique project category, the reduction of the maximum award amount for bike projects to $4 million. The most comments we received are on the creation of the arterial BRT program and the new market transit guarantee. And lastly, we received several comments supporting the creation of a new spot mobility highway investment category. On the comments received, there was comments that were supportive and some that were requesting changes or changes back to the previous. So TAB's decision was they're not adopting it in November. They're going to adopt the application in December, and they're seeking some further input from the technical committees. The next steps would be that the technical working groups provide their input. TAB will vote on the application in December. Then it'll come to this committee and council for concurrence in January. And expecting to release the application in February for those that want to apply for regional funds next year. So good set of comments that were partly driven by the fact that there's several changes that we presented to this committee before this fall. And we're making progress on that. Again, the projects up to $200 million in federal funds will be awarded next year through this process. That was the major items. The other items will be ones that are coming to this agenda for tip amendments and streamlining. So that concludes the TAP report. Happy to take questions on that.
Good. Any questions for Director Thompson? All right. If not, we'll move back to Director Thompson for the MTS report.
Last week, we hosted our third and probably final legislative briefing on metro mobility, what we've been calling our 101 session, educating the legislators and staff about just the basics of how metro mobility works and some of the challenges and opportunities of what we're working on to improve that program. This meeting was targeted for members and staff of the Legislative Committee on Metropolitan Government. that oversees the council. And we will be presenting the council budget to that committee in December. And so it was a good opportunity to talk about Metro Mobility, which is a big driver of the general fund use of state funds. So a good turnout and good questions and answers there. But there were 4 elected officials and 7 staff attended that meeting. The second update is that we are currently advertising for new citizen reps and modal reps for tab membership, representing district or citizen reps for A, B, C, and D, which are council districts 1 through 8, as well as 2 transit reps and 1 non-motorized representative. And for all of those, we're also seeking alternate members. And so those positions are advertised now, and hoping to have the committee of council members select those in January, and they would start in February at the February tab meeting. And those are 2-year terms, so encouraging people to apply. And if you have anybody in those districts or that are experts in transit or non-motorized modes that would be interested in attending, all the information is on the advisory committee opening website for the council, along with other advisory committees. That, Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if it's possible to get demographic diversity information about the tab makeup, gender, ethnicity, age, ability, and just from a standpoint of as we're looking to fill spots and identify particular candidates. I'm assuming that managing or maintaining or increasing diversity is probably a goal amongst membership.
Madam Chair, members, that is, if you recall, so that some of the tab members are not appointed by council.
Right.
They're counted by city and county reps. But we can give you information if it was provided to us about the current representatives.
It depends what people provided on their applications.
Oh, okay.
So that would be
The
part
white
of the
requirement.
piece of it,
Part
but
of the application.
correct. So any other additional questions for Director Thompson? All right. If not, we'll move over to General Manager Quistra.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll have 4 items. I'll try to go through them quickly. First item, I think that council members and transit committee members are seeing on their daily reports is regarding the Northtown Transit Center. Our Northtown Mall Transit Center is partially on property we own and partially on property that the mall owns. They've given us a deadline to vacate by December 15th. They are not holding us to that deadline as long as progress is made towards a move. They've suggested some specific location elsewhere on the mall property to move our transit center. Councilmember Chambliss has been engaged with this. Councilmember Lindstrom and Councilmember Barber have all been engaged in this. The new location they've provided us is across the street from Spring Lake Park residential area. And of course, Spring Lake Park is the city expressed concerns, as has the residents expressed concerns. So we've held some open houses. We've done door knocking throughout the neighborhood to get feedback from the residents and from others. We met with Representative Cagle, who represents Spring Lake Park and actually lives in that neighborhood. Last week, Councilmember Lindstrom was with us, and the meeting went really well. We're working with Blaine, we're working with the mall, and we're working with the city and residents to find solutions over the design of the new location that may mitigate some of the concerns that the residents have. But the meeting with Representative Cagle again went well, and she seems to be happy with the efforts that we're making to try to mitigate the issues. But of course, it's a concern that the city of Spring Lake Park and the residents prefer not to have right now. So that there may be a business item coming to this committee in the first transportation committee in December.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, I just wanted to comment that I regularly frequent Northtown Mall and am familiar with the existing site. I did a walkthrough of the new site and also reviewed some drawings of potential screening that could be in that parking lot area by the furniture store and Burlington Coat Factory. I think that screening would be an asset compared to what is currently there. So I'm really happy with what I'm seeing proposed.
Madam Chair, I'll just mention that the part of the discussion we're having with the City of Blaine is whether is the length of the screening that could be the, the length of the screening as well as the height of the screening with respect to how that property is currently configured and with respect to city ordinances. So those are some of the discussions, but that's the direction I believe we're trying to head. I'm looking at Mr. Hart and the audience, but yes, I think that's really helpful. Thank you for the comments. Appreciate it. Then I'll move to the 2020 legislative update. We've had a couple of bonding tours with MMB staff, and the governor's office staff was on November 1 and on November 12th with the House Capital Investment Committee. We have a request into the governor for $50 million of bonds over the next 2 years to support the build out of our arterial bus rapid transit system. The money is requested as flexible money, but the initial money will be used first for completing the D-line funding, which we're at a point of needing 20 more million for D-line. As you recall, that goes up Chicago and Fremont. And then the other request is for B-line funding, which goes from downtown St. Paul past Uptown area along, I believe, Selby and Marshall and then Lake Street. We're $20 million short on D-line, as I mentioned. We're $35 million short on the B-line, and so money would probably go there first, but we usually ask for this money in flexible ways in case other funds became available that we're not aware of right now. This is part of the process. We ask for it. Our ask to the governor is very public, and then the governor makes a decision on the configuration of his bonding bill.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
For BRT, where is the most common, or maybe what are the funding sources? Are they state, county, federal? Does it just depend? Has it been a little bit of everything, or does it tend to be one or the other?
Yeah, I think the funding sources, and maybe the chair knows more about this than I do, but the funding sources have been certainly some federal money through CMAQ grants and other federal money. We have some local funding, usually for the ABRTs, and then we typically have some state bond money that goes towards them.
And just a comment on that for highway or dedicated BRT, that those qualify for federal dollars. ABRT do not.
Yeah, Madam Chair and members, so the Gold Line, Rush Line, our county led, and county is funding the capital side of over 50%, was seeking the rest for federal. And then Red Line was a similar situation where counties participated.
And Orange Line.
Yeah, and Orange Line. And then arterial BRT has been, counties have not participated.
Have not in
the
the
arterial
arterial
at this
ones.
point.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Okay, next I'll move to administrative citations. We had administrative citations bill last year that was brought in late before the first deadline, but it was late, and so it didn't receive a hearing. That bill would allow us to change fare citations from a misdemeanor, which ends up being a criminal penalty, to a petty misdemeanor that could be enforced through staff who are not police officers. We think that this provides a more just way of administering fare evasion and dealing with fare evasion, and we think it'll also be more effective. So we've been speaking with a number of individuals on both the Senate and the House, and we see interest gaining in this bill. I was interviewed today by WCCO Television regarding this work and our ambitions in this regard, and also by Janet Moore this afternoon. So it's receiving more attention from certainly from lawmakers, and I think that gives it a little more attention from the press as well. But we think it's a really step forward to having a much more fair and just approach to fair enforcement, and we think it'll be more effective too in terms of our goals of having a greater percentage of the fares paid.
Just a quick comment on that. I've been getting the same positive feedback from legislators who are hearing about it, so I think it's headed the right direction.
Right. E-bus update. I promised I would keep coming back with updates on that. Today we have, of the 8, we have 6 that are in use. We've made a lot of progress with respect to the chargers that are in the Haywood garage. There's also been progress made on the chargers that are in that are online at the BCTC. The current issues are we have one bus that is not communicating with the charger at BCTC, but the other ones are. So that must be a bus issue. We have another 2 buses that we're looking at because of noise that they're suspecting are differential problems with the differential, but that hasn't been fully diagnosed yet. So we're still making progress. We're still having some problems, and I'll just continue to keep you updated on where we're at with those. But we do have 6 of the 8 back online. And of course, the charger at BCTC is really important as we enter the winter months and we lose range in the cold weather months.
Thank you for that.
You bet. And then finally, we have the C-Line millionth customer that occurred last week, so we're really happy about that. Milestone came 5 months after the C-Line opened. Right now, it's kind of early to look at ridership trends, but we're seeing already 30% higher ridership in that corridor, including 19 plus the C-Line ridership since that the C-Line has opened. On Sundays, the ridership is 40% up, so that tells you that they're not just being used by people going to and from work, although people work on Sundays too. I'm not discounting that, but it's also being used more for getting through recreational, personal trips and so forth. So we're happy to see the progress there, and I think we have a video. Of a rap to celebrate the C-Line I'm trying to find my notes, excuse me. It was written by one of our operators and performed by one of our operators named Theodis Turner Jr., whose rap name is Juice G. So we have a minute rap here to send you into the guts of your meeting. You gotta turn it up.
They say we couldn't do it. Mission impossible, but we did the impossible. Hitting the major goals, whipping the C-Line, hitting the million rides. Shout out to the operators, the way to stay on the grind. So you ain't gotta wait around on the 19. Like the light rail, boy, it's coming every 15. Limited stop, in minutes we on your block. Even Metro Transit shocked the way the numbers increasing. And paying on the bus is almost a thing in the past. Pay before we pull up, hop in, then we hit the gas. Safely, by the way, cause we professionals and we take pride on giving customer service. So let's celebrate and have a good time. Here's to the drivers that's holding down the C-Line. Let's celebrate and have a good time. Here's to the drivers that's holding down the C-Line. They don't understand how monumental this moment is. We just hit 1 million rides on the new C-Line. So it's only right that I give it to you the best way I know.
Madam Chair, who said transportation committees can't be entertained?
Exactly, that was awesome.
That is the end of my
Well,
report.
I will just say congratulations on the C-Line hitting that milestone that quick. That's fantastic. Are there any other questions for General Manager Quisha? All right, very good, thank you. All right, so now we are off to business. Our first item is the consent agenda. There are 9 items on consent tonight. Anyone want to entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve?
Motion,
Seconded.
second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the consented items are adopted. Next, we're on to non-consent items. The first item is 2019-182 Southwest Light Rail Transit Advanced Design Consultant Service Contract Amendment Number 8. We have Jim Alexander.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. First item tonight is 2019-182. relates to the Advanced Design Consultant Services. So we call this the ADC. This is AECOM, the consultant that has been helping us out with the design. They've been under contract since December of 2014. They continued the design that we had started off with. The preliminary engineering consultant. AECOM was the designer on the west, and Kimley Horn was the lead on the east. And so as we moved into engineering, we hired ADC for a contract under $117,654,000. And we're here tonight to see about getting an amendment for their work. So the ADC has been responsible for essentially putting all the civil and systems construction plans together. And you all know that we're out on construction right now with civil. As you've been out there, they've seen a lot of cranes in action. And our systems contract was just awarded just this a couple of weeks ago. So this amendment would reflects a number of things that have gone on in the past with this project. We've had some budget cuts where it's had to do some redesign. There's also been a second municipal consent process back in the day in 2014 due to some issues in Minneapolis, and there's a resolicitation of the civil contract that happened back in 2017, 2018, and then we also had project time delays related to the freight rail negotiations that we had to work through with BNSF and TCNW back in the day. And so this contract is really to continue the activities that are ongoing right now. That's really supporting the project office. So with looking at requests for information, there's change order designs related to change orders. There's a number of correspondences we feel from the contractor where we rely on our advanced design consultant to field and help us with their expertise, help us through those issues. Did want to speak a little bit about the on equity for this particular consultant. They had been assigned a 19% DBE amount. They are currently at 19.46%. That amounts to a little over 21 million that have been billed to date and paid. And so we feel that they're moving along in a very good direction. That number is continuing to rise as we move through this work. So tonight, Madam Chair, I have an item to proposed action that the Metropolitan Council approve a sole source contract amendment for Advanced Design Consultant Services contract to support construction of the Southwest Light Rail Transit project with AECOM to increase the contract amount by $20,623,565 for a total contract amount of $140,278,110.
All right, thank you. We already have one question here. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Hi, Chair. One thing that I really have been hoping for when we get DBE information is that it's consistently disaggregated. It's something that I think we communicated about earlier this summer. And so I really am happy to hear about the numbers, but one of the goals for us is to understand while we have our DBE goals, oftentimes we're still leaving chronically or persistently specific communities outside of that attainment. So it's just helpful so that we know when we're having success, when we're having that success at really reaching the full population. So I'm curious if we can start receiving that information when we have the opportunity to hear about DBE successes or opportunities or efforts.
Thank you for your comment, and I'm going to interject just briefly. I think that, yes, we are definitely moving towards that. I think that will be easier for contracts going forward versus some of them looking back. I don't know if that is the instance here.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember, we are actually slated to give an update on the project as a whole, and OEO will be here to talk about that in terms of where we are for all the contracts we have ongoing. And so certainly we did intend, I just didn't intend to include it with this item, but we typically want to give a quarterly update. Did hear you on the request, and so OEO will be here with me to give a presentation on the overall health of the project, if you will.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councilmember Zering.
Madam Chair, I just wanted, for the record, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote and the following two items after that. So the three items associated with Southwest, I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other additional questions for the presenter? If not, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-182. Anyone?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is business item 2019-321, Southwest and Blue Line Light Rail Projects e-Builder Contract Award.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. This has to do with project management software. We've been using eBuilder to help us through managing all the documentation we have on the project, and Blue Line Extension is also using this as well. And so this contract would cover both projects, 75% for Southwest LRT and 25% for the Blue Line Extension. This is okay. The system's been with us since we really started the project, and we actually lifted off on the Central Corridor, the Green Line, with this into construction. Been a very important resource that we have. We use this to document everything on the project. It allows us to transfer files to FTA, to our regional partners, and also with the contractor and the project office dialogue using this system daily. And so what this would be is looking for a 3-year contract with eBuilder to carry us through 2022. And it's essentially that the Met Council authorized the regional administrator to award and execute a sole source contract for project management system for the Southwest and Blue Line Extension, light rail extension projects to eBuilder Inc. in an amount not to exceed $644,876.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? All right. If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-321.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And motion carries. And we've got one more here. We've got business item 2019-337, Southwest LRT Property Owner and Tenant Advisory Services Contract Amendments.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Robin Kaufman. I'm the Director of Transit System Development Administration, and I oversee the what we call POTAS, the Property Owner and Tenant Advisory Services Contract for Southwest LRT project. We awarded, just for a little bit of background, we awarded this contract back in 2015. With a total of $800,000 with the purpose for this contract to support relocation of the displacees. We've amended this contract several times. We originally thought that there would be about 100 displacees on the project, and we ended up with about 177 as we learned more and more about the tenants. And then some of them have been very complex. So we have amended this contract previously. In through 2018, their primary role was to support the displacees and basically help find them new locations, just understand their needs, help get quotes, and help them with the relocation process. And then in 2018 and most of 2019, they've been really helping the tenants assemble their relocation claim packages for reimbursement. So that's been going through invoices and looking at what's eligible, what's not eligible for reimbursement. So I'm happy to report that all the displacees were out in time for construction, and of those 177 displacees, we've actually closed out 111 of those claims. So we've been able to get the claims in, and we've been able to close them out, and they've been able to successfully move on. There are four businesses that are appealing the final claim, and then the consultants are continuing to work with the remaining tenants, and hopefully be able to wrap those claims up shortly. So this amendment is to basically support some of the claims process, and particularly the appeals. As I mentioned, we have 4 businesses that are appealing the final decision and the claim. And so that goes through a process with the administrative law judge and can be timely. So we need some support from them to support our legal staff. So we are requesting a contract amendment to 4 of the 6 contracts. We have 6 contractors that are working on this. And so we are requesting an amendment to the Wilson Development Services to add $43,000, WSB to add $35,000, HDR to add $50,000, and Evergreen Land Services to add $15,000, basically to help with supporting those claims. We are also planning on extending out these contracts to 2023. A lot of times the appeal process is very lengthy. For example, we just scheduled one appeal for September of next year, so it can be a fairly lengthy process. So we are requesting to extend those contracts as well. A little bit about background. These contracts were competitively procured back in 2014 and awarded in 2015, but they will need to be sole source amendments just because these are the relocation specialists that have been working closely with these businesses and displacees for almost 4 or 5 years now. So they're the ones that are very familiar with them and know all the background and the rationale. Just a little bit about a little background on the DBE. There were no DBE or MCUB goals set back in set at the time that they're awarded, but I will note that four of these contracts are led by women workers. One is a woman of color, and one of the fifth contracts was just merged with a women-owned business, and that individual is working to retire, and the woman-owned business is the one that's taking the lead now. So that's a little bit of back on the equity and DBE and MCUB goals. So with that, Madam Chair, we're requesting the contract amendment, as mentioned, to these 4 contracts to add a total of $143,000 total.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? Councilmember Sterner.
Great, thank you, Chair. I just had some questions regarding with the contract and the expenses. What kind of oversight is done on the hours paid and that type of thing when we're distributing the money to these contracts?
Absolutely, Madam Chair and Council Member. We have a pretty in-depth process. We have a contract administrator that's pretty much managing these contracts. We also have someone that's working with the relocation, just focusing on the relocation. And so when we get invoices in, when we get our invoices in, we do go through them pretty closely, look at hours, make sure that they're billing for appropriate tasks, things like that. And there have been some cases where we've sent the invoices back and asked for them to review and revise. Madam Chair, if I could just add too, I think one of the challenges with these contracts in particular is that you never know who's going to file a appeal or who's going to be more challenging when we're going into a situation. We don't know, since we are working with individuals and individual businesses, so it's hard to forecast out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Atlas-Princeton.
Thank you. Because there was no goal set for DBE, when we receive the information in the future about DBE participation, will we receive information about these types of contracts if there wasn't a goal set, or is that not been included in our DBE reporting?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it about this particular contract?
This particular contract, if I can, to clarify, because you had started out with saying that at the time the contract was set, there were not DBE goals set. So I'm curious if that will be tracked in the information received that Jim mentioned earlier.
Yes, Madam Chair, Council Member, yes, we'll have that information as well in terms of if there's a consultant or a contractor that is a DBE or women-owned, we will have that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Thompson.
One of on federal procured contracts, you might have a goal that's set at 0%, which was if this was a federal contract. So that would be what the goal was set at is 0, and that is not uncommon in some of our types of contracts like this, or like in MTS bus purchases often have a federal DBE goal of 0% because there's no subcontracting opportunity in that place.
I just want to make sure that that there wasn't something, we're not caught in a place because if there wasn't a goal set or the goal was 0, that then we wouldn't hear when we do have a business that would qualify for DBE.
I would say it's a great question to ask because even how we have looked over the past few years, even changing how we look at professional and technical services, it's good questions that is helping us come up with better ways to report. Any additional questions for the presenters? All right, if not, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-337.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And motion carries. Thank you. Next, we are on to 2019-291, which is 2020 operating grant agreements with the funding transitway counties. We have Ed Petrie.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Ed Petrie, Metro Transit. I'm here to present business item 219-291, which is for the 2020 operating grant agreements with funding transitway counties. Back in October, I presented and the council approved 2019-269, which allowed or authorized the regional administrator to submit the grant applications with the funding transitway counties for 2020 funding for the Metro Blue Line, Green Line, and North Star Commuter Rail. Subsequent to that meeting, all of these grant agreements have been presented to the counties, and the counties have approved the grant agreements. And this proposed action this evening would allow the agreements to be executed with the funding transitway counties to accept these grant awards. So the proposed action this evening would be that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute operating grant agreements for the calendar year 2020 with the funding transitway counties of Anoka, Hennepin, and Ramsey to receive funds in 2020. It would be a total of just over 13.9 million for Metro Blue Line, which would come from Hennepin County, just over 13.5 million for the Metro Green Line from Hennepin and Ramsey counties, and just over $7.7 million from North Star Commuter Rail from Anoka and Hennepin counties. And with that, Chair, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Petrie? All right, if not, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-291.
So moved.
A motion and then second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we are on to business item 2019-329, which is Metro Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Master Funding Agreement with St. Paul Regional Water Services. We have Chris Beckwith. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I am presenting this business item -329. This is for the master funding agreement with St. Paul Regional Water Services. So the MFA, Master Funding Agreement, the MFA establishes the framework for the transfer of funds between the Council and St. Paul Regional Water Services for reimbursement of professional services and construction related to the Gold Line project. So an example of this is St. Paul Regional Water Services would have utilities that we would be relocating as part of the Gold Line project, and those are eligible for them to be reimbursed for. We do have to pay their staff to inspect those utility services. So that's an example of the subordinate funding agreement that would come under this master funding agreement. This is actually the 8th master funding agreement we have executed for the Gold Line, or are in the process of executing. We brought a batch of these through as the very first business item of this year, and this is one that we've just added to that mix. So with that, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a master funding agreement with St. Paul Regional Water Services for the Metro Gold Line BRT project.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the presenter? All right, if not, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-329.
So moved.
The motion?
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. 2019-330 is Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Section 106 Programmatic Agreement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Section 106 process requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their actions on historic properties. This is usually completed as part of the environmental review process, but the FTA has determined that we'll take a phased approach for this because of that really compressed timeline we have in the 2-year project development phase. So the programmatic agreement will outline the process for completing this 106 process, the assessment of historic properties. We will measure identifying historic properties, assess effects, consult with stakeholders, and identify measures to avoid, minimize, or mitigate any adverse effects. This programmatic agreement is actually negotiated between the Federal Transit Administration and the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office, which we call MNSHPO. And there are a number of agencies that are invited as signatories as well. So the action before you is that the Met Council would authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the Gold Line Section 106 programmatic agreement developed jointly between the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and MNSHPO, the Metropolitan Council, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Highway Administration, and the Minnesota Department of Transportation.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? All right, if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-330.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we are on to our final business item. It's business item 2019-335, which is bus wash rack replacement, and we have Robert Brimstead here.
Madam Chair and committee members, I'm Robert Grimstead with Metro Transit in the Engineering and Facilities Department, and I'm here to present a proposed action to authorize the award and execution of a contract with NS Corporation in the amount of $4.3 million for the purchase and installation of up to 10 bus wash racks at multiple facilities. The wash racks at the current bus garages and overhaul base are past their usable service life. They have a typical life expectancy, and we're starting to exceed that now as we've put together this request for proposals for full replacement of the systems. And throughout the year, buses are washed on a daily basis to reduce that corrosion and chemicals and maintain that clean appearance that our customers expect. And so this contract will replace all those fully depreciated wash racks over a 5-year period, and will also include an option to purchase the new wash racks for the Minneapolis Bus Garage. In addition, the existing wash racks were not necessarily designed for the current fleet. Mirrors have continued to grow. We've added the bike rack on the front of the bus. And so these newer wash racks have the systems to better work around those extra components in the bus and not damage the mirrors or have those fixtures on the bus actually cause damage to the wash rack. So that should overall extend the service life of the wash racks and reduce the number of brushes and the times we have to replace those on the bus washes. So we had an invitation for bids earlier this summer. There was 10 plant holders. We opened the bids in mid-August, and NS Corporation was the lowest responsible bidder and recommended for the award. Through the Thrive Lens analysis, this promotes stewardship through managing the replacement of that aging infrastructure and ensuring that we have the clean buses going out on the street. And so the funding set up for the contract was set up with a base purchase and options to execute as funding comes in. So this initial order will be placed for the first 5 wash racks for the Hayward Garage, the East Metro Garage, and the Ruder Garage to replace those. And then as money comes in through the future capital improvement program and through budget amendments, the rest of those will be authorized with additional notice to proceeds. With that, I'll take any questions on the business item.
Very good. Any questions for the presenter? Councilmember Sterner.
All right, thank you, Chair. My questions have to do with the sustainability of the water. Like, is the new car washes use less water than the previous washes? Are there any water reclamation with these washes, and what kind of chemicals are used?
Chair and council member, so as part of the process, our existing facilities generally don't have that type of system in it. We have one that has utilized that type of system in the past, but we found that it takes additional chemicals to treat it. A lot of the total dissolved solids become very challenging to remove out. If you can think of all the junk that gets underneath your car and apply that to a 40-foot or 60-foot bus, and you run 200 of them through a night, it is a lot of debris and solids to remove. And so we've struggled. We've attempted it. We've tried to use them on those reclaim systems, but we've started to take the finish off the advertising outside of the buses. We've affected the paint quality in the buses, and even the windows on the buses have become challenges that as we've tried to utilize these, we have not been successful, and then that just creates more expenses down the line versus using clean water for the system. One thing that we're going to attempt in the Minneapolis Bus Garage is to capture that rainwater from the roof and use that through a pre-treatment system, because it doesn't have as much debris or junk or total dissolved solids in it, to be able to use that for the first wash cycle. And so that's an instance where we're going to try to capture some storm water to be able to utilize that in that first process. And then as we look at that, we'll see if we can implement it on these systems, because there may be the option in the future to adapt these and increase that. But we want to make sure to try it on one system first before trying to go through all of them to make sure that we have one test site as a success prior to implementing that at the other facilities.
Just a follow-up. Can I do a follow-up? Yeah, just a follow-up. I mean, when you do these car washes, I mean, do you work with our environment division with water and look at different things, or is transportation on their own and environment is totally on their own too? Is there any cross-pollinating of ideas and knowledge?
Chair and council member, we have worked with them specifically on the Minneapolis Bus Garage on that project when we were going through that wash system as the best way to do this. And so we did contact some staff from environmental services a few years ago. I think it was similar to around some of the same staff that helped out in the St. Paul and Rail maintenance facility that captures the rainwater and provides it to CHS Field for them to use in irrigation. And so we did reach out with some staff to share our ideas and collaborate a little bit as to a best practice to use in one of these systems, and then see how that could then be implemented at future sites.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
I think maybe another thing you asked about was the types of solvents and things that we use, and has that been evaluated to see if it's the most environmentally friendly that we can use in the, that was another kind of part of that question that it would be nice to hear about.
Chair and council member, we have looked at those types of chemicals because we try to use a very neutral pH soap detergent, and the detergent is one of the biggest pieces to make sure that we're getting that detergent on the buses to create that action to get the debris off of it. As the state goes through and helps ensure the chemicals that we are using them, I know that we're in compliance with them and looking through that process to make sure that we're using kind of like most neutral. It's safe for the environment, it's safe for employees, and so I know that our safety staff are involved in that. And bus maintenance, we do look at that chemical and try to make sure that we're using as little of it as possible to get the action. And that's one thing that we're hopeful with this new wash rack system. We'll be able to better apply that detergent more regularly to the buses and potentially reduce our detergent use in the system.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the presenter? All right, if not, entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-335.
Motion to approve.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. All right, thank you very much. All right, before we move on to information, we have to determine what goes consent and non-consent. Obviously, all of our consent items proceed consent to the full council, and I would propose that all items can go consent except for business item 1 and 4. Did anyone have any other thoughts on that?
I guess I would add number 7 to there as well.
Okay. All right, anybody else? All right, so we will do items 1, 4, and 7 will proceed non-consent to full council. The rest will go consent items. And next we are on to information. So we are having the suburban transit providers. So turn first to my right to Nick Thompson.
Madam Chair and members, as our partners, the suburban transit providers, are walking up tonight to present just a little background. They are outgrowth of state law changes in the mid-1980s that created the ability for communities to create their own transit service. We've called opt-outs or different, but we go by suburban transit providers. They now represent 12 suburban communities in the region, providing just a few stats, 1/3 of the express service routes. They also provide transit trips within their communities. The council provides ADA service in their communities, so they focus on they don't have that focus in that area. You often see items related to our suburban transit providers. Even tonight, we had a red line operating contract that you approved, bus purchase for MVTA. In December, you'll be approving the council's budget, which includes capital and operating allocations to suburban transit providers. And so we thought it'd be great to invite them here today to talk about their services, let you meet them, and have a discussion about questions you may have, or just a dialogue. So I'll turn it over to them.
Welcome, and first up is Mr. Clinton Hoopa, who is Apple Valley City Council member. So welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Director Thompson. We thought as we put this together, we were going to throw a video together. I'm really glad now we didn't, which would have certainly been second fiddle to the work of your writer. Before I jump in, though, I just have to comment on Dee, who you gave the award to, the recognition earlier. She was the one who greeted me as I walked in the door with a smile and a welcome and got me in the right area. And even though this clearly not her job, was a great way to walk into the building. So just more proof that our operators do a lot more than just steer the bus down the road every day. So it was good to see that this evening. Again, as I was introduced, Clint Hoopa, current chair of the STA. I also sit on the MBTA board and Apple Valley City Council, so that's what gets me here. A few things, we'll go through a few of these. Whoops, this is too easy to click, so we'll try to slow that down just a little bit. What you see on your screen are the 4 providers that make up STA. I'm going to introduce a few of my colleagues here. experts in each of those 4 providers and lets you tell them directly kind of about the operation. But I just wanted to set the stage a bit for kind of who we are and what we want to accomplish tonight. First and foremost, it's just introduction. Most of you have not had a chance to meet us. Maybe you've seen, as Director Thompson said, a few items on the agenda here and there. Maybe you've heard from your colleagues a bit. I do thank Representative Barber and Representative Sterner for showing up at our MBTA meetings and our STA meetings. It means a lot to have those dialogues here. We really hope to, beyond introduction, also just kind of grow that. We all know that we have challenges funding-wise coming up. We have challenges operations-wise coming ahead. The more we can do this, the more we get to know each other's operation. I think we're better going forward. We get to legislative session. So kind of expect to see a little more of us maybe attending the meetings, learning more of the challenges you have. It's one thing to see it on the agenda and read it. It's a little different to actually hear it directly. So again, thanks for the invite. Let me jump through these so we can keep you all on time this evening. This slide shows a little bit of sort of the travel shed of where we are. The one thing I will say this does a good job of representing is who's at our park and rides and where they're coming from, where they're going. What this doesn't do such a good job representing is, I think if we look back, even when I was first in this role, 8 or 9 years ago, a lot has changed in who we're serving in our areas. So it was riders of choice for a long time. It was transit, it was commuters, right? They would get on in one of our communities, they get on a bus, they go to work. That was very often downtown Minneapolis, some in St. Paul. What we have seen grow more than anything is the riders who have a transit dependency and a need to get to work. That might be coming from an area in the core to get out to Burnsville Transit Station, ultimately out to Shakopee, where that job is. We're seeing more and more of that at Plymouth and Maple Grove, kind of in that direction. And so where we're serving and who we're serving certainly has changed and changed quickly as we're seeing employers locate in areas that maybe are not as readily served by that kind of hub and spoke model that we're used to. Those pictures are harder. There's no license plates to read, right, when those folks get on the bus or get on transit.
So I know, I know for sure Southwest Transit and MBTA do surveys. Do rider surveys, or you have information where you've been kind of tracking that? Because I know we do, so I was just
curious. And we can certainly have our experts from each of the agencies get you that information where they're coming from. Some of those are a little anecdotal, and some of the best stories are the people you meet on the bus or the ride, but that information is out there.
Thank you.
Ridership just shows kind of what the different providers have done as far as ridership. Like just about everybody, as gas prices have come down, we've seen some decline in ridership, not as drastic as some areas. I do think construction and 35W in particular has had some negative impact on ridership this year, as we've all probably experienced that pain just a little bit getting in and out of downtown. Getting people to places is sort of what we look at doing. Our average of what we've grown and what we see growing going forward outpaces what we see in a lot of the rest of the region. So certainly more growth there in both people and jobs. Again, this goes to talk about the job growth in our areas as well. And with that, I don't want to take all your time because these folks know their areas much better than I do. I'm going to turn it over to, whoops, I'm going to break your equipment. Then I'm going to turn it over to
We'll still invite you back. Don't worry.
Okay, which way we go?
All right, did anyone have any questions for Councilmember Hookup before we? Councilmember Sterner.
Yeah, just on the graph of the map that you have, it shows some of the communities there with where they're boxed in, but there's also some pink area.
Yeah.
So are those areas that you serve that are outside of the transit authority there?
So these come from license plate surveys that come out of the transit station. So very often, whether you look at the top and the bottom, or you look at the two fingers that jut off down to the bottom, people will tend to get in their car and drive to the nearest transit station or the most convenient one that will get them to where they're going. So in Apple Valley, we often have folks from Farmington and Lakeville drive up to Cedar and get on that transit station there. In the north, you're seeing kind of the same thing as they come from an outlying area, hit the most convenient transit station to then get on to finish their commute.
Okay, so yeah, so Farmington's a big part of it, but they're not in the...
They're not in the area, but we do have riders. And I think these surveys do a good job of informing where our riders are coming from, and maybe where growth is maybe imminent for us as we've seen those populations grow.
Okay,
does that help?
You. Yep, it helps a lot. Thank you, Mr. Hoopla.
All right. Hey. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm Dave Jacobson. I'm the third choice, or the third line here. Our city council member had a last minute conflict. Our CEO went in and had surgery today, thinking that the city council member would be available. And then, of course, there's me. So thank you so much for having me. Um, little background on what Southwest Transit is. We are joint powers of the three cities of Eden Prairie, Chanhassen, Chaska. Um, so that gives you a little flavor, a little geographical area. And to answer your question, just grossly, we've got 40 communities that use our park and ride facilities, and that's done by a park and ride study that's already done by the Met Council, and it's a license plate survey. So over the past year, we've provided about 1 million rides. That's the third year in a row, pretty consistent. Our Prime, anybody know what Prime is here? I know Council Member Barb, she comes to our commission once a month. Prime is a fancy term for dial ride. It's Uber-esque, Lyft-esque. You don't make any standing orders. You don't call 4 days in advance. You call. You want to ride? We come get you. It's that simple. So our Prime continues to grow. We're up about 11%. That's our projection for 2019. We're already over 100,000 is what our ridership is for Prime Month. State Fair, everybody's favorite summertime gig. We had 115,000 rides and change, which is the highest of any one gate at the bus terminal at the State Fair. We started Prime MD, which is a similar to Prime, except we're allowing to schedule rides days in advance, a couple of weeks in advance. We're working with partners, medical facilities, to help us supplement the cost to the rider. And that's off and running, kind of slow right now, but it'll get going. And there's a picture here, again, with help with Nick and his staff, where the council actually purchased a sole source for our use, the low floor 45-foot coach, which is the big bus there, and to help expand options for the disability the community. And it's so far so good, very well received. So what's our focus moving into 2020? Looking to continue the expansion of our Prime and our Prime MD services. We're planning, we've got a CMAQ grant, so we're planning for services from like Eden Prairie across 494 to the Mall of America and some airport service. Looking always to connect service to jobs, the infamous last mile. That's where this Prime has come in, done a marvelous job for us. We're kind of running out of room in our Eden Prairie garage facility. Looking to expand our storage there. We also have some construction-related items going on with our Southwest Light Rail Transit. We were able to sell a portion of our property to the Met Council. So you can say either it's the first stop or the last stop, depending on where you are. But in Eden Prairie, and so we've got some funds for that. Looking to, as the agreement was, cohabitate, signed a cohabitation agreement with the Metropolitan. So I love that, cohabitate. We're also doing our Southwest Transit Asset Management Program, because that federally required. We wanted to do even more with it to help us with our CIP. Then we've got some unmet needs, and Luther will talk a little bit more about this, but our operating funding to maintain our current levels due to a loss of about $500,000 from the general fund. We're looking also for funding to meet our state of good repair targets, and maximize useful life, trying to meet mobility needs for a growing first population in our communities and our service areas, meeting the first commute needs prior to the startup of light rail to the Eden Prairie area. To address the need created by the Met Council eliminating transit link. It's not a one-to-one, or they're not even comparable types of services. So we're trying to figure that out. And then we're also, last but not least, looking for funding to incorporate some regional technologies, most notably on our vehicles. One of my favorites is the onboard mobile gateway. It's not my gosh router, it's the onboard gateway router. UvaSense transponders, that helps us get into the 46th Street station, Mall of America. Cubic go-to validators, we need those on our prime vehicles, our small vehicles. We're looking also for some dead reckoning capabilities on our big buses. Amtrak, which also ties into that. hopefully some new fare boxes along the way and some ticket vending machines on our park and ride facilities, on most notably on 212, otherwise known as our string of pearls. And the other thing I would like that is on the list here, if possible, is to look at this, on Marquette Second, the signs for timing. What is that? Next trip timing signs. They're up and down. And see if we can get some more consistency for our customers. But that includes mine.
Okay. We'll pause.
Question?
Anyone have any questions? I have a question for you if they don't. So I have a question about the Prime MD. So what is the area that, for that you're serving? Like where are people going that you're picking up, and to what medical facilities are they coming into?
Yeah, it says within and adjacent to our Southwest Transit service area. So, for example, Shakopee, the hospital in Shakopee, or Methodist, or, the France Avenue.
Like Southdale, and so
Yeah.
you're kind of in that southwest
We're not going to
quadrant.
go to Berry.
Right. I was just curious, because I'm curious, having done a lot of work in the metro mobility area, I'm very curious to see how that works, and kind of want to, hopefully learn from you guys.
Again, it's a big difference. I mean, you have to be certified to be, disability, of course, to ride metro mobility. What we're talking about are, say, 80-year-olds, who need to go to the doctor. So that's kind of that we're looking at or targeting.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Chambliss.
Madam Chair, yes, you kind of alluded to my question already, and that was the 80-year-old that needs to go to the doctor. Are many of those riders seniors?
Yeah, a lot of them are.
Okay.
So far, it seems, well, of course, that's the age cohort that has the highest preponderance of medical issues. And as I'm quickly getting there, I find that out personally.
All right. Any other questions for Dave yet? All right. We'll move on to.
All right. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, Plymouth Metro. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the council, good evening. Good to see you all. Thanks for inviting us. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Noor Kassin. I'm with the City of Plymouth. I oversee the transit system of the City of Plymouth, Plymouth Metrolink. Plymouth Metrolink is a public transit agency operated by the City of Plymouth. We provide more than 500,000 rides annually with 97% customer satisfaction rating. We have 3 different types of services. Express services, which is a service that takes people from Plymouth to work in Minneapolis and other cities. That's mainly rush hour express services. We have reverse commute services that operates from between Plymouth and Minneapolis, and the intent for that is to bring other residents of other cities to Plymouth for employment, or if you want to look at it from a different perspective, give Plymouth employers an opportunity to have access to a workforce in other cities. We have dollar-ride service that operates within the city, and some limited locations in neighboring cities. That service is Metro Mobility Transit Link, in both. It operates within the city with some limited locations to Minnetonka and Golden Valley, Robbinsdale, for medical and other important areas for our residents. We switched that dollar-ride system to on-demand micro system, and mainly introduced an app-based sharing system, Uber and Lyft-like. And that happened 2018 October, and since then we have seen an increase in ridership up to 38%. And we continue to have our dispatch online line for those who want to schedule rides in the old-fashioned way or cannot use technology. But we have seen a lot of people who are using the service now when it's available, because they don't have to stay on the phone and hope for somebody, and it's making really good progress. Overall, Metrolink is doing really well, and we're heading in the right direction, but we believe there is no transit agency in the Twin Cities can be excellent without the regional transit system as a whole improving and designing and having interconnected, collaboratively designed regional transit system that is somehow magically free from friction and politics. But after all, we're playing with people's lives. This is the livelihood for people who want to go. I talked to passenger who lives in Apple Valley and works in Plymouth. She really doesn't care whether the side of the bus it says MBTA, Metrolink, or Met Council. She wants a ride to go to work, and after work, she wants a ride to go home. So somehow we have to see that and design and plan for that, and hope. Our hope is that whole region. Of course, there will be differences and the competition here and there, but I think we need to grow out of that and move forward, find a way to serve a lot of people and get where they're going. With that, I thank you very much. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
I'll just say first off, thank you for your comments because it's that spirit of collaboration, which is why I wanted you all to come here and present today and have some of our council members who aren't in districts you've got 3 up here who are in districts that have suburban transit providers, but it's good for the whole committee to hear. Council member Atlas Ingebrigtsen? Oh, I thought you were.
Sorry.
Okay, I thought you were
Arthritis.
flagged.
It's cold
All
out.
right.
My hands are.
But there you go. My peripheral vision is very good. So there you go.
Good.
All right. Questions from council members? Council member Sterner.
All right, thank you, Chair. I just had kind of a question. I know we'll probably get through that one, but I know Minnesota Valley Transit Authority is looking at communities emerging and that type of thing. Do you see some synergies by work with some of the other suburban transit authorities, either through merger or collaboratively, or is that, or with the uniqueness of each city, you're able to, keep it local and respond better to the community without the, sharing merger or that type of thing?
Madam Chair, members of the council, that's a good question. Thanks very much. We always believe there is opportunity and improvement in getting bigger and collaborate and joining forces to provide better service. There are rules and regulations. I think there are laws that prevent transit agencies in our time to join unless they're connected. So of course we like to like Maple Grove and us, we're next to each other. It's viable that we can join and have one big transit service, but I think Mike doesn't like me.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's busy in planning and moving ahead and providing better service for their passengers, but we definitely keep in mind we have better transit routes that come to Plymouth. One local service that we really like, when we don't have options, we like Route 645 from Ridgedale. It's in Minnetonka. It's all day, weekday service from Metro Transit. We use it a lot. So there are benefits definitely already out there, and that's why we really like the transit planning to be above and beyond, if anything, on the future. The goal to be how can we provide better service? It doesn't matter what type of bus and the brand of the bus and which agents. It should be a way we can share routes and run Metro Transit and Plymouth can have one route that covers both cities, and then we can share the cost. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Any additional questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're on to Maple Grove Transit.
There we go. Good evening. My name is Mike Opatz. I work for the city of Maple Grove, and I manage Maple Grove Transit. And Chair and members of the committee, thanks for having us this evening. Maple Grove Transit just provide express bus service to and from downtown Minneapolis. We have a demand response service called My Ride. It's a dial ride type system that we do both standing orders, advanced reservations, and on-demand rides. So a little bit of everything there. On an annual basis, we provide over 837,000 rides a year. We have 2 large transit stations with parking ramps, and we have 3 smaller park and ride lots as well. The demand response My Ride service serves primarily Maple Grove, parts of Brooklyn Park, and Osseo. We're looking hopefully in 2020 maybe to extend that over to the Brooklyn Center transit station as well. We have a fleet size of 47 buses. Earlier we had we talked about the park and ride origins. Maple Grove 2 also has people coming from over 40 different cities. So we kind of like think of ourselves as the regional provider of that Northwest quadrant. Our 2020 focus is on workforce rides. About a year and a half ago, the city council hired its first economic development manager. There's a real renewed focus on working with our local employers to attract and retain those employment sites, and then as well to get the workforce there. So we're really working on ideas for first and last mile service through added MyRide service in 2020. We're also going to be adding 6 reverse commute trips to and from downtown Minneapolis. And again, that MyRide service to Brooklyn Center transit station could be a component of that as well. Our strong need would be to get a couple of vehicles in the fleet for that MyRide service expansions. And then we also have a operating and capital need, funding need to implement our local circulator route that would go from east to west through town, hooking up with the Maple Grove Hospital on the far west end, and going all the way through downtown, shops at our lakes. If you haven't been out there lately, the number of housing units right in downtown Maple Grove is really blossoming. And then connecting all the way to Brooklyn Park, the future Blue Line extension would be the goal of that. So those are our 2 needs. Kind of related to that as well as we have an age-friendly group in Maple Grove. It's a community-based group, and they have all kinds of transportation needs that they have outlined for seniors and in general people to age in place. So that's another focus that we're trying to figure out how to serve. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you for the presentation. And I was once transit dependent temporarily, and it was nice to be able to make that connection from Brooklyn Park on Brooklyn Boulevard to Maple Grove. And I liked that you're looking at options for 2020, have added the reverse commutes, which is really important for people not only getting to work, but allowing them to move without getting stranded is so crucial. So I appreciate you and everyone else for outlining the needs and allowing us to work together on these.
Yeah, we have great partners with staff at Met Council, Metro Transit, and our local providers, private providers as well. So we look forward to implementing those in 2020.
Councilmember Chambliss?
And just one more question. That connection to the Bottineau Blue Line extension, that would be going down Broadway from the current station, or is that what you're looking at?
Well, right now it would be in with that timeline, a little bit up in the air. If this service were to start ahead of time, we would be coming down Elm Creek Boulevard and hooking up somewhere along County Road 81, probably initially just the Starlight Transit Center until the Blue Line station is up and running in that general area. Connect. I forget the exact cross street that's closest to Starlight. That would be the Blue Line.
Okay.
But that's the goal, is to hook up right with the Blue Line extension. That would make the most sense.
Good. Councilmember Zarin?
Madam Chair, thank you. I have a question. Does ATU represent any of the workers with the Suburban Transit Association?
Does
Amalgamated Transit Union? Is there a labor agreement?
Maple Grove Transit contracts with Metro Transit for its express portion, so that portion is involved with AT. But I'm the only full-time employee for Maple Grove Transit, so we don't hire any drivers or mechanics directly in our case. Everyone's kind of set up a little bit differently, who they operate with and who their unions are, But in our case, that would be our connection to AT for our express service.
Councilmember Zarin?
I just would like more information on labor agreements with the.
We certainly can provide that for each provider and how that's set up differently.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get that. Any additional questions? All right, next we are on to MVTA. Thank you.
There you go. All right. Good evening. I'm Luther Winder, Executive Director of Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. Just a little bit about Minnesota Valley. We're the second largest transit provider in the state of Minnesota. I do say we're trying to be first, but it's going to take a little while, but best watch out because I think next year it might catch you. We do about 3 million trips a year. Right now we just fight back and forth with Duluth. This particular year, we were awarded System of the Year by NIPTA, which is Minnesota Public Transit Association. To answer your question about from our union representation, we work with Smiths Sons, our primary contract, and it's employee owned. So the drivers actually own the company, so they receive stock options and things associated with actually ownership of the particular company, private company that they have. Um, this particular year, we also embarked on an agency rebranding, which we changed our tagline as well as refreshed, obviously, our buses. Bus drivers moving forward with the "We Got This" tagline. We also started in 2019, back a few months ago, our first micro transit demo, which actually dealt with looking at Savage and Western Burnsville. What we had in the city of Savage was there's a low density area that necessarily wasn't served well by our flex route service that we had, which was flex route is an old type of service that all transit kind of adopted in some low density or challenging areas. In order, we had a fixed route bus deviate if someone called in advance and asked for the deviation. But what we found across the board, I started these also in Delaware, what we find across the board is that even though you schedule 30 minutes worth of work, say an hour running 30 minutes of flexibility, they're always underutilized. So what you find is for flex route deviation buses, sometimes you get better utilization if you move to something where micro transit, where you have the ability for the bus to deviate or go based on when you receive obviously reservations. So we moved in that particular area for that. What we continue to see is it continue to grow simply well for us. When we had the flex route, we had a maximum of say 15 passengers. Now we're seeing 40 passengers. We're seeing 40 passengers on that particular service. So we've actually more than tripled what we've seen on our previous flex route service in that particular corridor. Big thing I do want to highlight is the demonstration project, which was funded by the legislature back in 2016, initially funded. And also, we've had private partnerships with Amazon and Minnewauk and Sioux, providing direct operating funding, which actually funds some of the actual service components, legs of that particular service to their particular organizations, to particular private organizations. What I found when I first came in was there was a need in the particular Shakopee, Scott County area. There were a number of businesses that did not have, that were understaffed. I think when I came in, Mr. Casino talked about there were 40% understaffed and they hadn't built their second tower yet. Amazon had not yet opened, so that was a big issue there. Shutterfly talked about their need for workers, as well as obviously from the whole component when we looked at even Valley Fair and Canterbury. So the iteration came in obviously with the discontinuation of 494 service, look at something to go from Mall of America, the Burnsville Transit Center, to then obviously the Marshall Road Transit Center to connect into the core, because the goal was to add that regional connectivity. What we've seen on the 495 since it actually started, and now accounts for almost 5% of our total ridership. To understand a service that never existed prior to August of 2016, now actually accounts for almost 5% of my total ridership. It is reverse commute, reverse express. So we're from the core, obviously down to Scott County, as well as what you see as individuals in Scott County and Shakopee. There's been a great contingent of UNM students and students that are all going from there, being able now to get to school, because that service operates 7 days a week. It's about 41 to 43 trips a particular day. What we also see on that particular service, because Minnesota Valley is one of the only suburban providers that actually provides late night and weekend service, we actually have higher daily ridership on the weekend than we do the weekday. Because what you continue to see is the way we're currently configured as if we're just express. But what we're continuing to see is you're seeing shift work. You're seeing different components of people who need transit, not just going to the 8 to 4:30 job. That's what we're seeing, obviously. That's what we had to do, obviously, to extend this late night and weekends to actually add those connections for individuals. I think as we continue to talk about as a community, how we continue to fund, obviously, add more frequency and actually more service on the weekends in the suburban areas across the board, so we can actually access some of these employment centers that we have that continue to open up. Another project we have this particular year is our Apple Valley Transit Station expansion. That started back in June. That's going to have 2 parking levels, about 392 spots. We're also adding an elevator. That consistently is one of the highest percentage utilized parking rides in the entire region. That's one of the reasons why I received that grant back in 2014. We do have unmet needs, I think, in our particular service. I think we all do. Right now, we receive about 1.5 to 1.7 of entity authorization to maintain state-of-the-art repair on 20 facilities, 20 parking rides, and transit stations across the board. That's not enough, obviously, to maintain that. I think we asked for some RTC funds from the council this particular year for 2020. None were available. But as we continue to see the build out for new services, it's important to make sure to set aside its funding to maintain existing services. Because if you don't, what you're going to find is state-of-the-art repair issues, and you're going to find, obviously, it's going to cost more in the future to maintain and get them back in a state of good repair if you don't maintain them, work to fund those options. These now, prime example for Burnsville Transit Station. Burnsville Bus Garage was built in the 1970s. It actually was a converted roofing company. So it never was supposed to be. It never was meant to be a garage. Right now, we have some issues with some deterioration of walls. Obviously, we have some overcapacity issues, and we need to actually continue to work to obviously strengthen and support that facility forward. It's also, as you know, our TAM plan to date, it's the lowest ranked administration and parking garage in the region when it came to when the TAM plan went out. It was done by the council, obviously with MBTA and all certain providers' participation in it. Operating deficits. One thing that we continue to have from our service is we continue to see with the loss of general fund for 2019, as well as expiration of CMAQ grants, and actually rising cost of services. Our services rise at a yearly. This is all council services and actually Metro Transit services. This particular 1.2 million as you go into 2020, 1.4, and 2021, 1.8. So what you see is that service will not continue. So there's no expansion of service. That's just to maintain the existing level of service that we have. If those funding isn't met, we'll actually have to start reducing service. Moving on across the board to general fund allocation. One of the things that happened back in 2018 is we want to talk about before talk a little bit historical. We received a new funding policy. Prior to 2018, suburban providers primarily received motor vehicle sales tax, as well as we received in council policy or procedure a percentage of brand pass, which is motor vehicle, but it's usually allocated by the council. That was changed in order to provide a mix of still receiving some regional allocated motor vehicle sales tax, but also providing a portion of general fund. That was done in a sense so at the time that we all had a stake in a buy-in, obviously continue to go to the legislature and talk about the need for a general fund for across the board, for all services across the board, so we could all maintain our services and grow, whether it be Metro Mobility, whether it be base services for Metro Transit, as well as base services, obviously, for Minnesota Valley Transit Authority, as well as all suburban providers. What we've seen was when we first enacted that policy in 2018, we received about $1.5 million. That's on all four providers. But in FY19, we only got about $500,000. And that really resulted in the fact that the council did request about $36 million general fund appropriation for Metro Mobility, but there wasn't anything left over from that general fund appropriation to provide any funding to suburban providers. And what you see in the beginning of that slide is just a screenshot of our actual policy, understanding that based on that's actually the procedure, policy states the exact same thing. That as directed by law, we understand that Blue Line, Green Line, North Star, and Metro Mobility receive general fund appropriation first, and then what's left over comes to service providers in the same manner, which would be obviously us, base services, Metro Transit, but we didn't receive base. We didn't receive any general fund, which this particular session, because it happened to us in 2019, we all experienced some hardship where we had to either cut services, not do some hiring, restrict obviously moving forward. So we've continued to say as we move forward, how can we continue to make sure that at the general fund our appropriation is requested, there's enough funding obviously so that we can, as suburban providers, maintain our base funding moving forward.
So 1 second before you, if I can enlist Director Thompson to comment a bit about the general fund policy and how that was incorporated and what the actions that the former council took with the distribution of that funding.
Yes, so this was spurred out of legislation that was passed in legislative year the spring of 2017 that changed the MVES formula for allocation for a 2-year. The legislation changed it for a 2-year cycle, and they directed the council to revise our MVES distribution policy. So we, working with the suburban providers, we came up with the new policy that the council adopted, went into effect January 1st, 2018, and is still in effect. And it changed it really to a block grant program where it took a lot of the mystery of the old policy, the black box of the old policy out. And so now everything's a block grant, but we added in general fund for the first time as one of the distributions. If there is extra general fund above what's required for light rail, commuter rail, and Metro Mobility, that is shared for bus operations to the suburban providers under the block grant formula. If there's a deficit, that deficit is also shared. So in 2018, there was extra to share. In 2019, the first 6 months, there was extra to share, and that was 525,000. But as we all know, from the state operates on their fiscal year started July 1st, and they did not fully fund the requirements. There was no extra general fund, so that's when the general fund distribution went to zero for the last half of 2019, and for the first 6 months at least of 2020, there's no anticipated general fund that would be sharing. But
So those of you, if any, haven't had any briefing on how the funding piece of this works, by all means, definitely reach out to Director Thompson for details.
yeah, and the next important milestone in budget for both us and for the suburban transit providers is the adoption of the council budget, and it relies a lot on the MBES forecast, and so the new revised forecast will come out next week or the week after. Then we'll share that, and we'll adjust the final adjustment to the budgets based on MBES before you adopt that. Will reflect any new adjustments to MBES for next year and the year after. So.
Councilmember Atlas Ingridson.
Given the presentations we've received previously around the increased need for metro mobility and our structural deficit as it relates to transit, what's the likelihood that we will have an amount that would allow us to have an overage that would tip into supporting?
Madam Chair and council members, the step one of that was to create a separate budget for metro mobility so that it is not competing with any bus operations. And the legislature took that step last year. Unfortunately, they didn't fully fund that metro mobility budget, but that is the priority, is to fully fund metro mobility's separate budget, allow it to grow and the budget to grow with it so that it is not competing with any of our region's bus operations. So we are hopeful that they will fund that. They did take a major step, and now they will see metro mobility as its own budget, and it's a requirement both federally and at the state level. So it is our position, and we've been fully supported by the suburban providers that this must be funded. And it shouldn't compete with the bus operations. It shouldn't, but it did this year, at least in the first portion. So that's our key policy.
If I'm correct, we won't be seeing the fruition of that until 2021's budget cycle at the state level. Is that right?
Madam Chair, members, the next legislative session is anticipated to be a bonding session, but the legislature and the governor can always pass other increased funding. But at this point, it would be another year before there would be another year beyond next spring before it would likely be affect the general fund or the overall transit budget.
And part of the reason why I think it was so important for each of the providers to present here is you all have seen the numbers that we have for the operating numbers going into the future. All of the transit agencies have similar issues going into the future with operating funds. And so that was important, and I think that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to make sure that we all had a chance to hear from each other. So any other questions quite yet? I turn it back to you, Lou.
I just want to say, Chair and Council Member, it's important to also understand that the four suburban providers are sub-recipients of the Metropolitan Council. So thought process is that we'd like to make sure as the council continues to talk about the structural budget, they do have the responsibility as our MPO, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, that we're sub-recipients of, to look in the future, hopefully to include our particular needs and with the overall needs as well. Because we don't necessarily have the avenue to receive funding if it's not included, obviously, in the structural deficits with the council now, because we're sub-recipients, and that's the responsibility of our MPO. Last is our future discussion follow-up items. So we want to continue. We want to obviously continue to have discussion. From our start, we thank you for this invitation. I think as James said, he predates me a little bit. He's been here since like the 70s. I think he says it's the first time that he believes that we have obviously presented in front of the Transportation Committee. I don't think it's been the 70s actually, but we'll just say that. So we do thank you. We'll always welcome, obviously, come at any particular time. Then we hope to give some regular, periodic, obviously, updates to the council, to the Transportation Committee. Also, funding, just to continue to follow up before. We just want to obviously continue to have that discussion of how our needs obviously can be incorporated in operating as well as capital, because we all have state of the repair needs. And obviously, I think Nora said it best. From a customer gets on a bus, they want to see the same level of consistency when a customer gets on and walks in a parking lot, they want to make sure there's not cracks in the ceiling when it comes to a Minnesota Valley parking lot, but yet there's not in other places. I mean, the state could repair something from a capital standpoint that we should look across the board and make sure it's funding incorporated that's equal to obviously the needs based on the transit provider as well as technology. I think one of the things we have to make sure we understand is that also the customer experience should also too look very similar between the various translations when it comes to technology. When it comes to those systems that access the transponders that access 40th Street and Mall of America, we can't provide most train stations are gated. So our buses can't go in those stations to provide any type of connectivity unless we have a transponder. So if we don't have the technology, we can't access it. That means from that standpoint alone, there's a technology barrier obviously providing these connections, no matter what we feel the need is, no matter how we believe there's no matter what our operating funds are, no matter what our capital funds are, if there's overages, if we don't have the technology to access it, we can't access it. We don't have those transponders. When it comes to ticket vending, obviously, from our standpoint, that's always a big component for our, obviously, as convenience to our customers, as well as more ways to pay. In my service area, I have one TVM at one station. There are TVMs, obviously, Metro Transit operates on the Red Line, but outside of the Red Line at Apple Valley Transit Station, as well as now we do have one, I believe it's been installed at Cedar Avenue, where the Red Line operates. Outside of where the Red Line operates, I have one, which is the Burnville Transit Station. But I do have multiple other transit stations that would welcome to have a TVM there for ticket purchasing after hours. Like I said, we do run late night weekend services where staff isn't available to sell tickets, or where customers maybe cashless or in a bank that would like the opportunity to get that advantage, obviously paying reduced fare or getting those cards at a particular station. So I think all across the board we have those desires too. To look to see how we can regionally expand out the use of ticket vending machine across the board in the suburban transit corridor.
Okay. All right. Additional questions? Councilmember Ferguson.
I had a couple questions, but how a capital budget? How is that budget funded now?
Great question. So as subrecipients, our NTD, if you're a direct recipient from the federal government goes in, actually does an equation based on your population. Your population awards you what's called NTD funds. As subrecipients, we don't have even our population size may dictate that we should be a direct recipient. Our calculation, how much NTD we receive, is directly done by the council. So that 1.5, 1.7 is done obviously by the council, and that's what we receive. That's who does our calculation. That's
Director Thompson.
And then the other main source is regional transit capital bonding that the council approves to the property tax that applies to their region, all the transit taxing district. Primarily used for bus fleet in this region, and sometimes technology too.
Well, that's a great council member, council members. When it comes to that, we only have access to that funding for bus replacement only. We do understand there has been the ability, obviously, to utilize that funding for shelter replacement, for technology, but suburban providers only have access to that funding strictly for bus replacement. And that's one of the things we've also talked about, uniformity in our ability to access those funds for stuff other than just bus replacement, because it's just bus replacement for us.
Councilmember Ferguson.
When did we originally decide to have suburban transit providers in the region?
1984.
Yeah. Director Thompson.
Yeah, I believe legislation was 1984, and then you formed at different times, I believe.
And are there other regions our size that have 5 transit providers that are providing services?
Yeah.
Maybe not structured this way, but
Chicago.
yes, there are several that have multiple transit agencies.
Chicago being PACE, it walks around as suburban. When you look at most large cities, you see Chicago being a good example that mass transit is a really good job for, but sometimes it becomes suburban services due to low density. There's ability, obviously, to work with suburban providers. California does it quite well, where you have a main provider, obviously, like San Diego Transit does San Diego. You have ones that wrap around that. So theoretically, yes, it's done multiple other systems, because suburban transit is a little bit different. The needs and the provides, and obviously, than what you see. And prime example, Greta. Greta is about the same size as Minnesota Valley, actually. So you have Martha that does excellent system. It does mostly downtown Atlanta, it does Atlanta. But you have Greta that does the suburbs around that, which does express and commuter type services about the same size as we are, Minnesota Valley Provide services. So it's traditionally done across the country.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like, Eden Prairie, which I know well, has obviously changed a lot since 1984. And I just wonder, as a transit user, moving here from Toronto or New York, the system here doesn't work the same way or as efficiently, I would say, as bigger metros. And so I just wondered if there's some inefficiencies that potentially happen as a result of having all these different systems and not being, going from Eden Prairie to the airport, Eden Prairie to the mall, Eden Prairie to Maple Grove is more difficult, for example, because you're going through other people's service territories. There's not sort of a coordinated way to run those buses. In particular, when you think of that outer ring, around 494, and you want to optimize. We're not really optimizing a network per se, right? We optimize our own network. Each suburban provider optimizes their network, but we don't necessarily optimize a regional system in the way that if we were going to the legislature and asking for additional funding to say we're optimizing a regional system to improve the economy, that would be a great case. But I think we would struggle to basically make that case at this point. I think at the legislature.
Again, it was important to get all of us in the same room.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sterner?
All right, thank you. Just had one of the questions is I know like we struggle with operator retention and recruitment, and how are the suburban transit carriers doing, the providers doing on that?
Very good question, and I do want to two questions there. We have some challenges with operator retention after recruitment. One of the things that we've continued to see is, prime example, Minnesota Valley Transit Authority pays our starting wage is only about $17,000 an hour. But what we continue to see is operators like our particular service, and why we don't have issues maintaining it, because they like the book of work we're put out. Those are some of the traditional things that you may see. All of us struggle, obviously, because when you look at finding enough CDL workforce is very difficult, mechanics or what have you. But one of our strengths that we continue to have when it comes to hiring, for us, the standpoint is that the book of work, they like the book of work in which we're able to produce, we're able to provide for which does help. Everyone chooses to work based on the environment. If there's an operator, or if it's a person that's working in a bank, or a person that's working anywhere in McDonald's, would have the environment matters. So sometimes you have to work to what your strengths are. So we try to do our best to work to those strengths.
Councilmember Sterner?
Right, and I know like Schmitty and Son, does a lot of the operation, but do you own all the buses, or do they?
Buses are owned by, buses are owned by the council. They're leased, obviously, to all providers.
Okay, very good. And then one more, Chair. All right, thank you. And then my last one is with MVTA, because obviously that's the one I'm most familiar with. But east-west transit seems to still be a challenge. So I'm just wondering are you looking at plans with the red line and the Venture Orange line and getting over to the zoo or the Y or the garage, with some of the service hours to generate, youth and for our equity type position on transit needs?
Great question. I think across the board, and I think this also, Chair, Councilmember, I think the same thing that goes with the last question. I think we all understand where we want to travel, so definitely we see a couple different east-west services we'd like to put out. We see some connectivity we'd like to do between Dakota and Scott County, as well as additional connectivity to see the Riverside area, as well as some other locations in particular core. We may have it's always talk about if you have the will, there's a way, but for us, as a will, funding, then you can make the way. So when you talk about how we can do better alignment on the outer ring, we all understand from our customer standpoint, looking at schedules, we do have the ability to serve each other's transit stations, and we do. But we also recognize that with limited funding, our presentation really just dealt with just base funding, just maintaining our existing funding network. Once we address that, I think there's definitely the opportunity for us to talk about how there's expansion in the future. There's definitely a need for expansion on east-west on our particular service area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? All right. I have a question and a comment, so you can't run away too fast. But this is for all of you, so you don't just have to leave Luther up here, because he might be tired. No. So my first question is a request. I think there was a lot of, throughout the presentations, information about capital planning needs and capital needs. I think it would be very helpful both from the capital and the technology piece to get a clearer picture of what each of you need and what the gaps really are. I think that would be helpful. And I'm sure you're doing your capital planning processes and that type of thing. I know I would benefit from that, and I think that that would help us overall as we look at it. We certainly are very keenly aware of the operational funding question, but it would be really nice to see something on the or on the capital side. And then I had a question, just and this kind of goes for all of you. What do you anticipate for sort of that changing fleet diversity, where you've got the combination of computer express service and all this microtransit? And so, how do you see your fleets changing? Like, do you need, you know, are you looking at more commuter express stuff, or do you just see the microtransit taking off in different kind of vehicles for that? I don't know. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, well, I can take part of it. I'll talk about Southwest Transit.
Yeah.
In our case, our micro transit service is, like you are aware, is growing like crazy. And we're working with Dick and his staff, taking the equivalent value of some of our old replacement vehicles, not replacing them with a big 45-footer commuter coach. Instead, you can get small vehicles, which you can buy a lot of, versus, one 45-footer at 600K plus, and investing in small vehicles right now, because that's where our growth is. Our fixed route is pretty flat, the downtown to the U of M. So yeah, the fleet's changing.
Yeah.
And see, for us, we see we actually want to move away from our smaller cutaway vehicles to actually move to 30-foot buses. We don't know we either have cutaways, we have 40-foots, or we have obviously MCIs. Our thought process is that we shouldn't provide a local service with a cutaway. We see the capacity there to continue to grow, so we actually want to move to 30-foot buses for about the 15 and 60 cutaways we have. Whereas microtransit, that's a small snapshot of our service area. That'll never be than just a little microcosm of it, but we're primarily a fixed route. Our second highest ridership category outside of the 63% of service we provide to Minneapolis, that goes to Minneapolis 35W corridor, is our suburban suburb services that we provide, obviously, in our particular service area with connections to the Mall of America. So we actually see a need for larger buses as opposed to small in our service area.
Well, that's good to hear, is that so that we don't bucket providers in a certain light, but it's good to know kind of, that's why it was very important, I think, to hear from all of you today. So,
Madam Chair, members, we have mainly two types of buses, small buses and big 40-foot buses, and we recently introduced MCI buses, motor coach buses, 5 of them, and we did that because we want high capacity, so we don't have to have 2 trips instead of having one trip. That way you save cost. But we are hearing from people who say we don't like this because it takes time to get on. It's not friendly with my knees. So we're thinking about that. Our microtransit small bus was designed, and our thought was that we can use microtransit where it's efficient, so you don't have to have a big bus running through the neighborhood picking up 5 people. Instead, you can have a small bus to pick those people up and take them to the park and ride. That way you get efficiency. That's still the intent, and our goal is to have more park and ride based big buses and then small buses throughout the city, gathering passengers, bringing to the park and ride, so that you can take them to Minneapolis and St. Paul and other areas where they work at. We are learning that the need is more complicated than that. I recently spoke with one employer in Plymouth who said his employees, 70% of them are from South Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center. We don't have service that goes sideways. I talked to somebody who works in Plymouth but lives in New Brighton. The design of the regional transit system right now is to go St. Paul or Minneapolis, and then after that go where you want to go. There's no way to go from suburban, or if you want to live in Golden Valley, you have to go to Brooklyn Park. You'll have to travel to Minneapolis almost. So we're realizing that, and we're thinking, hey, maybe it's time to start running sideways. But how far can you get? Because there is this invisible borderlines that you cannot cross. If you travel to Tonka, that's a different city, and they don't provide this service, they didn't pay for it. Before you know, then they were yelling at me I'm going to their territory. So the need dictates what type of fleet we need, and it changes frequently. But right now, our goal is to have small buses running through the city to gather people and then bring to the park and ride. So we'll still continue to have those type of buses, big 40-foot bus and small.
Very good, thank you. Director Thompson, you have a
Ma-
comment?
Madam Chair and members, as you adopt the capital budget in December, it is a 6-year look at, and it basically is enough money to replace the fleet that's out there and on a cycle that has been agreed upon in our fleet policy. There's almost no room, not enough capital there for expansion, except for one type of service, and that's Metro Mobility, which we have to meet demand. And so Metro Mobility is really taking a lot of any potential for expansion of service on the capital side. And it's in the 6 years, we're okay. But if you look beyond that horizon, it's going to be one of our regional challenges just to replace existing fleet for providers in Metro Transit and MTS without some other rethinking of how we're going to fund capital, particularly around the fleet. So, and that doesn't even take under account park and rides that need some repair and things like that.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen?
So one of my question, and I don't know who it's to, probably to us, is around what are our collective and public engaged efforts towards a shared policy agenda? Are we working together around what we're looking for from the state in partnership with the suburban partners and finding, and maybe that moves towards Councilmember Ferguson's concepts of a true regional, thinking really regionally, or do we not? And when I say public engaged, to kind of unpack that language, is there's a lot of the public, whether it's transit oriented, community-based organizations or nonprofits or groups that are really strong advocates for this. And I think oftentimes we don't tap into that part of the population when we're looking to do things in the public sector as well as we could. So I'm just curious.
I would say I think that part of this, we've been meeting more frequently with the Suburban Transit Association. I think Mr. Hoopak, if you want to comment too. And we're looking at kind of putting together, at least at a policy makers level, to start having some of these conversations, especially as we move into the legislative session. So I think we're working on it.
I don't know what else to add to that other than yes, we're working on it. We've talked about this in our last few STA meetings, and outside of that is how do we get together before we get to the legislative session? I would see it, not to put a percentage to it, a large percentage of what we all need to do is the same thing. We need to increase funding on the capital and the operations side. We need to serve all those areas. Just like your regions, we're always going to have some things we disagree on what the right direction is for our region versus the region as a whole, but those shouldn't hold us up for putting a combined voice forward. You talk about those, as the demographics of our suburban areas change, I can look to Apple Valley and tell you there are a couple pockets who absolutely could use more service to get them to where they need to go, even to get them from where they live now to get them to the red line, so we can get better utilization out of that investment we made. So how do we work toward those things and not get stuck on the things that maybe historically we've gotten stuck on disagreeing on? We got to move the big pieces forward, or we're all going to have, you said, 6 years from now, right? We can't fix our facilities now. 10 years from now, we can't replace our fleet. So that needs to be our focus. If we don't fix that, we've got a bigger issue.
And that doesn't completely get to all of your question, but I think that, once we have some of this type of engagement with each other, the next step is looking at the system regionally and looking at how we apply best practices and how do we reach out to customers, whether they're moving, because as Luther was describing, people will move from our system down to go take the 495. And those sorts of conversations, I think, where we can actually start engaging our customers better can be kind of a follow-on from this. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
I guess the one thing I wonder, or just don't want to get lost, is that we have customers, yes, but we're public agencies made up of citizens and active citizens who I think can be really strong partners, whether they're corporate partners or they're nonprofit organizations who bring a value that sometimes we can't always bring. It may be because we're too busy with other things we're dealing with, or maybe it's resistance to new ideas. It could be flexibility of tools, or someone who's an expert in researching regional transit innovation in other parts of the country. So I just would encourage those conversations to include our wonderfully rich nonprofit and maybe thought leaders around transit as a part of helping to think about possible solutions. And perhaps there's a meeting that's inclusive of those entities who want to contribute resources towards thinking out how we can really have a wonderful transit system where you can move from a place like Toronto or New York here and not feel like you're losing something. And I think there's just such an energy about this, especially from younger and younger populations who don't want to live car lives and want that here. And so I just want to encourage us to be open and inclusive to all the different resources that we might be able to tap into.
And Chair, if I might just say that Luther is often too modest as he talks about this, but talk about the 495 briefly and that service out to Shakopee and those employers there, and getting them when they're going to build a facility that is not connected well to the rest of the region to contribute to be part of the solution. Get people there. Luther got both of those organizations to step up and put dollars behind that. That's a challenge when you try to do this across 494. I get you to a hub, but how do I get you that last mile or half mile when it's 25 below zero out, right? That's not a walkable distance, even regardless of what the study might say. So those are exactly the partnerships that help us solve those gaps, and without them, and then you start to build ridership that becomes sustainable from there.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
I'd also say those are some of the voices then when you're at the legislature talking with the legislature that people listen to in addition, not that they don't listen to our voices, but in addition when it's, an employer who brings those kinds of resources to a community.
Knowing the history of the 495 very well, it was business leaders that were being convened primarily by the mayor at the time, Brad Tapke and myself, and that was the voice of the business leaders when we cornered Luther, and who took it and ran with it. And so it's, it was really those business leaders, I think, that really made the difference, especially in getting the funding in the early years, was having some very vocal advocates. Yep.
See the Riverside area, they're really big for us. We've done a nice video for us as well, talking about the testing, why 495 was such a vital link for them, for to get to work. They're really big for us, obviously, maintaining funding, obviously, growing ridership too. I can send the video out. That was a great testimony. A lot of all of our documentation in Somalia, that really could reach out to continue to grow that particular market, because that's what our community wants. They want to grow with those connections before, as we try to.
And we're also undergoing a process, I'm sure you've heard some of it, maybe not all of it, our own service improvement plan of Network Next. And part of it can be the connectivity to areas served by suburban transit providers. We can talk with our staff to see how that makes sense and how we inform some of that as well. Additional questions? Councilmember Ferguson.
Just to comment, I think, anecdotally, I guess I would say from the business community, I think many are highly frustrated with sort of their ability to have more of these kind of listenings, right? Where we have a need for workers and there's people that are underemployed in another part of our region. And I think the sense of the business community is a transit system. We don't do a very good job of making that connection. I've heard from probably dozens of them of their struggles and frustrations. And that's a group that if we want to get meaningful changes in legislation, have the ability to put pressure on some of the people that work against us at the legislature. But I think their sense is that that money, if there's additional money, would not necessarily go to help the needs that they have. So I think it's something that we really want to think about engaging with the business community and really understanding how we can be that connection, especially in some of our areas of concentrated poverty, to job centers. And not make it a one-off exception, but something that we do, and something that when Amazon is looking to come to the region, that we are part of the recruitment package as opposed to an afterthought. related to that, and because we don't know how to work across 494 and think about how we get people to different regions. I think it's a terrible missed opportunity in this region to be able to leverage our transit network to make those connections and move people out of poverty by connecting to the currently hundreds of thousands of vacant jobs in the region. So.
Yeah, okay. So the one thing that tells me is innovation. We talk about innovation in some of our other legislative presentations. Being a slightly smaller operator, we have the ability to innovate, try something, fail fast if it doesn't work, and try something again. And we need to be able to do more of that. And that's where you see requests for things like these demonstration projects. Let's use some old equipment. Let's get it on the road. Let's try and do some of these things and see if we can build around it to serve exactly that need before we make a big investment in a bunch of new capital to maybe fit a need that isn't there. So,
And the businesses will pay for it.
we have to go out there. You have to be brave enough to go ask them to participate in the solution that they're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any additional questions, comments? All right, well, I want to say thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I think this was a very good discussion, and I look forward to having more. Thank you. So we have one more information item tonight. I'm going to ask if it's possible, if you can manage to keep it to about 15 minutes? Absolutely. Okay, perfect. I'm going to stand up and tell these guys thank you.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair, Council members. I'm Bruce Howard, Director of Customer Services and Marketing at Metro Transit. Along with me is Adam Bell, our Senior Project Manager in Marketing. And we're here to give you a preview of Metro Transit's redesigned website. So real quickly, some background. The first bus schedule appeared online in the fall of 1997. At that time, it was part of metrocouncil.org. And then in December of 1998, we created metrotransit.org. So Metro Transit got its own URL. From that point on, the system and the website have continued to grow. And we wanted to give you a little preview of that today. We have about 3 million visitors that come to our site every month. So this is an important resource for our riders. And it's been since, I think, 2014 was the last time that we have redone the website. So it was time. And Adam's here to give you a little preview of some of the features and functions that you'll see.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with laying out a little bit of the philosophy that guided this redesign. If you're familiar with our current website, it certainly looks a little bit dated by today's standards. That, of course, wasn't the case back in 2014, but by now it has aged. Trends have changed in the web. Trends have changed particularly in transportation. We have our customers seeing their transportation information via mobile app, via Google web pages, Uber, Lyft, things like that. So they're coming to expect a modern, clean experience that's easy to navigate and not real cluttered. Another piece, so we wanted to deliver on that and make sure that customers felt that this was a modern site. One of the things we found in a lot of our testing was that the apparent age of our site caused customers to question the validity of the information and data that they were seeing. So even though we do, by a long shot, provide the most accurate trip planning information and schedule information, customers were a little wary because it looked old and outdated. We wanted to change that. Additionally, we wanted to make sure that it was focused on our most frequent users. The vast majority of our customers who are coming to our site are looking to plan a trip or take a trip. By the time they've made it to our site, we in marketing have made the sale, and people really want to make sure that they can take that trip, find out if it worked for them, and if not, what their other options are. So we really focused on that, as well as our recurring riders, commuters, folks riding on a regular basis. So what I'll start with is a quick overview of the homepage, which you can see currently. Again, it's a lot more white space, a lot cleaner, and we focused really heavily on the trip tools in the main section. If you can follow my mouse, hopefully you can see that. I'll point out a few items. A couple things about the trip tools. We put schedules and maps right in the front so people will see it. One of our biggest complaints we get today is that customers cannot find schedules for our buses, which, as you imagine, is a pretty critical item for people. One of the problems we saw is that we called our schedule section routes and schedules. Customers would see the word routes, not necessarily connect that, and kind of poke around until they found it. So we found out that that was just not the language customers were using. So we really wanted to go to a language method that mirrored what the customers were thinking. So again, through testing and surveys and things like that, we landed on schedules and maps because people said, well, I just want to find a schedule. Well, why are we calling it something other than a schedule in that case? So that really guided the site in a lot of ways. I'll show you in a moment here, but you're able to access schedules either through a search now. If you know your schedule number, you can go right to it, or you can go to a schedule page right here. That'll show you everything. We also have our trip planner here. I'll tab through this real quick to show you. These are our most important tools. The next trip real-time information we have here, and then our rider alerts, which we've elevated from our front page from being a little bit buried to our front page. Again, we want to make sure that customers can get these very, very easily. I'll start here. Another item we've done that brings things up to speed with the modern expectations is we've added autocomplete to our tool. So now we've eliminated the single greatest error that customers have had with our trip planner, which if you've used it, it's entering an address and it's saying unsure address or we don't know where this is. Very, very frustrating. As a user myself, again, I know that's frustrating. We've eliminated that problem because in this system here, you cannot enter something that isn't validated. So by the time you click on it, put it here, that's a correct address. So you won't get that result ever again, which is really great. You will still have issues where if there's not a trip, it will tell them that, but it's not because the customer put in the wrong information. Additionally, just to kind of highlight the plain language, we went to leave now. As it sits today, it's just a clock that says the current time or actually the time you happen to open the web page. So rather than make people have to think like, what time is it? What time do I want to leave? We just have leave now. So that submits right when you did it, right when you click the button. Again, plain language wise, depart at, arrive by. Again, simple changes from depart and then a clock and arrive and a clock. We want to make sure that customers really get that little help to understand what they're seeing. It seems simple, seems obvious now, but we did see a lot of trouble with people doing that in testing. I'll show you how the trip plan works real quick. It's thinking. That's something else we've added so that customers know something's going on, that it's not just sitting there. And we maintain all of our trip plans here on the homepage so you don't leave. We want to make sure that customers don't feel disoriented. One of the things we did is try to make sure that customers aren't taken to a new site when they do something. It's not 100%, but whenever we could, we did that. So again, to maintain that experience. So you're still here. You have a quick overview of your sites. You can or your trip plans that we've suggested. And when you expand on one, you get your map right there. That's interactive. You get your trip plan right here with some new fun graphics that look a little more updated than the current bus in-person icons and things like that. If you don't like that one, you can open this one. And there you go.
Real quick, we've got a question from Councilmember Chambliss.
Oh, yeah, I could wait too, but
okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chair. I just had a question about the leave now and the accuracy. A lot of times, I use some of the other apps, and if I say leave now, the bus may not arrive for 5 or 10 minutes. So just wondering why default to leave now versus leave in 5 minutes or leave in 10 minutes.
Madam Chair, council members, well, that's based on the schedules. We're just assuming that the customer is going to tell us what they want. We can't make that assumption that if they want to leave in 5 minutes. So if the customer says, I'm leaving now, we have to make that assumption leave now, and it's based on whenever that next bus is coming. We'll plan based on that, and yeah, you might need to be out there. Additionally, we do build in about 5 minutes of time plus walk time.
Okay.
So whenever you pick, we're going to build that in from whatever distance that the next stop is. So there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'll kind of continue the homepage tour here. Again, I showed you next trips and alerts. One more item I like. Again, alerts are very deep in our site right now if you've ever used them. Right now they're on the homepage again. And again, we stay on the page. We don't have to go anywhere. It just pops this up. You get to read it, you close it, and you don't have to start over. Another item of note that I want to mention as we're going through this, we paid specific attention to writing this site from the get-go with screen readers, low visibility, and ADA accessibility from the get-go. That's not something we've had that's not something that I feel that we've dedicated enough to in the past, and it's something that's been really great to do this time around. Our new developers have been building it and really digging in and helping ensure that this is built from the get-go, so there's less things like we did in the past where we would try it, go back and fix it after there was a problem and kind of just build it as the issues came up. We're really starting from zero here and starting from the beginning the right way and have a long-term testing plan to ensure that that accessibility is maintained as the site progresses throughout the years.
Councilmember Ferguson.
So this takes if it's someone's going through one of our suburban riders, it would put them on that bus and would show them the timing of that bus?
Madam Chair, council members, yes, the suburban transit providers who you just heard from, we plan and provide their data or we plan trips and provide data for their routes as well.
Okay, because it seems like it's a little inefficient to have 4 different sites that are all providing the same data. Because when I'm looking at Southwest site, I'm getting, I have historically gone there to get my Southwest data so it's just a thought as we were trying to think about where we could be more efficient.
Director Thompson.
Madam Chair, that's a great example of, I think we've geared it so this is any route for any customer, but it's a kind of a legacy of them wanting to also have their own. But I think from a customer standpoint, this is the place to go always, because it will include all their routes and all their information.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, yeah, correct. Anything that they provide for us, we take their data feeds, much like someone like Google would take our data feeds. We aggregate that here, and from a customer standpoint, it would be pretty seamless from a trip plan. Also aided, of course, by the regional fare system, where you can pay with any fare or with the same product on any route. Real quick here, I'll continue. We have our new section here. This is replacing our current news section and our current ad slider. Couple things about that. One, ad sliders are very ineffective. We know that people don't see them. We know that people don't click on them. And our current news section is pretty boring. It's just a bullet point of text that sits somewhat static. What we're doing now is we're combining those two. Many of the promotions that Metro Transit does have a corresponding news story. Many of the news stories have imagery that we think would make this story more exciting. Those aren't showcased in a way that's exciting to the customer nor fresh to the customer. So as you can see down here, it's the combination of, here's the North Star's upcoming 10-year anniversary, but also here's some service changes. And again, those are things that would exist in both places today. It's kind of duplicative sometimes. And then there's some things that wouldn't exist in one or the other. But really, it's combining it so that it's a more fresh, dynamic feed that's much more useful to our customers. I'll talk about the navigation here real quick, just to note that we have redone the navigation to make it more obvious for our customers and more useful. We've prioritized that information for trip planning over everything else, like I noted. But we've also optimized some information that's not trip planning related in the footer. A big one that I'd like to call out, because it's come up again a few times today, is that careers and job hiring and things like that. We have in the lower part of the site a careers section, something that we tested, looking for people looking for jobs, and we found about a 95% success rate of people scrolling right to the footer and finding that and clicking. So it's turned out to be really good. People generally look in the footer for jobs, it seems, so we put it there. So again, using data and information and testing to put stuff where we know customers are going to be looking for it. Let's see here. I want to show you the schedules and maps real quick here. Again, feel free to chime in with questions if you have them. So here's our new schedules and maps page. This is really redesigned again so that customers can find everything they want. I'll show you, here's our most popular routes up top. We have the 20 most heavily ridden routes in Metro Transit system under popular bus routes. The idea here is about 80% of our bus rides come from these 20 routes, so we know that a lot of customers are looking for them, and we want to make sure those are really quickly accessible. Of course, we do have a place for all routes, but this allows us to present the most important routes right away without making a cluttered page where every single route is on there or showing nothing that just says view all routes. We have our green line, we have our bus rapid transit, our commuter rail, our new interactive map, which is, I think the most exciting part is having selectable layers so you can turn things on and off. Right now it's kind of a fire hose situation where you get everything, it's slow. And there's a lot to wade through. The part that I think is going to probably be the most useful for folks is looking for park and rides, where you can turn off everything and just see your park and rides rather than, if you're looking for a suburban park and ride, again, another theme from today, it's a lot easier today on this new site than it is today. And then finally, our regular static maps, of course, are down here. So I'll show you one more, our bus route page. So where they all live. We have many, many routes. So let's take a look at a schedule page. This is another one where we really reorganized the information. It's all the same information you'll find today, but the importance is focusing on the customer that's coming to this page. One of the things we've learned, and understood over the last couple of years now is that a customer looking at a route page, if they're looking for the Route 5 bus schedule, they know they want a Route 5. They know they want the time. They don't need an overview of where does this bus go or what's the general frequency or what's this, little nuance of, they know that they want the 5, they know where it's going. Again, that's not everyone, but the majority of people who are coming want that information. We don't have it set up that way. There's a lot of overview of the route today, but now this is all trip information. We lead again with our Show My Bus feature, where you can see live updates of where your vehicles are throughout the system. There's all our buses. We also have our alerts on this page as well that affect the route. And then, of course, we have a much easier way to access schedule information. So today you have to have a double radio button. So you have to first select, do you want Monday or weekdays, Saturday or Sunday? Then you have to select northbound or southbound. And you might not get the right one if you have the wrong button selected. So now we made it so it's only a single button. So if you want weekday northbound, it's here. If you want weekday southbound, it's there. Click on that and it takes you right to it. Of course, we have that information I mentioned, the overviews. It is still here, but again, we know that if someone's really going to be trying to learn about this route, they're more likely to be poking around, looking for that information, whereas the people who are riding every day, they really want the schedule information up here. Finally, a couple other items I wanted to just note is our web store, which looks quite a bit cleaner. So this is the new version. Everything can be done on this page. You don't have to go into the store as deeply to add value compared to, say, today, which is here.
Councilmember Ferguson.
How far away are we from like Apple Pay for your Go card?
From the go-to card, I can't speak to that, Madam Chair and council members, but we are going to be doing a mobile app uplift where you will, in the early part of 2020, where you will be using Apple Pay and Google Pay for the mobile app.
With touch to pay on the bus?
No, you'll be able to buy your tickets with our mobile app. We're still a little bit ways away from the touch to pay as sort of a cloud-based system. I could get into that, but
yeah. We just approved a little while ago a new payment system, right? So will that have that ability?
No.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, I can speak a little bit about this. It's not part of our current payment fare system. There's a cubic upgrade to the go-to card that needs to happen first, but
yep.
It's possible, but just not in the near future from my understanding. So back to the store here, I just wanted to note, this is what it looks like today. There's a lot of text, not a lot of visual help. So again, what we have here is a way for people to see what they're looking at pretty quickly. The part I really like is this section down here that shows a lot of features that I think are underutilized, like our My Fare Card list, a way to manage multiple cards, our auto refill program so people can subscribe and get their cards filled up automatically. This is what it looks like on the new site, which I think is quite an improvement over this over here, which is just not visually appealing. It's a lot of reading. You're not going to know what it is. So again, we wanted to make this important information front and center so people know how to use it and don't have to think too hard or look too hard. Beyond that, did you want to say something? Beyond that, it's getting close to launch. We're looking at going live December 14th. That's a Saturday where we'll be launching it, making sure everything works on a nice lower ridership day. We're very confident that it will work great, though. We've been doing extensive testing. A lot of work has gone into this, and we're really excited for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, Madam Chair and council members, Adam's done a great job leading the team. I know we had to go through this rather quickly tonight. There's all kinds of stuff in here. If you're interested in seeing this before it goes live, give us a call, and we can continue to walk you through this and answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, apologize for having to rush through it. I will say this is a much needed improvement. This looks very nice, I think, my opinion. So, any other questions, comments?
I just would concur that it has the usability, I think, makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness around keeping it accessible and designing with accessibility in mind and plain language. So.
Thank you. One thing I will add too that I think is really exciting is unlike our previous iterations, we are now staffed in a way that we can respond to changes a lot quicker. This site is built in a way that can respond a lot quicker. Marketing has been lucky enough to get 2 full-time web development professionals, a usability expert and a front-end developer who have been really doing a lot of the work on this, Ellen Thompson and Rich Bothe. And I'm really excited to see how they carry this through once it's live and it lives as a living site rather than the static site we've kind of had in the past.
Councilmember Sterner.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I know Councilmember Atlas Engelbretson brought up a thing, but plain language. I'm wondering, will there be a translation feature where you could change to different languages and maybe touch on that?
Madam Chair, Council Member. Yes, we currently have Google Translate on there right now.
Yeah, but it's pretty much.
And then we also have some specific translated pages. Google Translate is, if you can believe it, not perfect. It has some weird syntax things as any sort of auto translate, but it's kind of one of those gets the job done tools. We are looking at a new system because Google is in the near future sunsetting this feature, so we're going to look for something that continues to provide that. But for the short term, we're using Google Translate on the whole site.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to adjourn.
Very. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.